On a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, we're going to look at what Nikolaj Ehlers said with media following his signing with the Carolina Hurricanes, and the final episode of 32 Thoughts came out, and I'm going to give my thoughts on what Elliotte and Kyle talked about when it came to Nikolaj Ehlers and Keandre Miller and all the crazy stuff that went into the Hurricanes acquiring both guys. All of that and more on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the everydayer for making this your first listen of the day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking anything but your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the Credentials Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers, also the co-host of the Search Cast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. We got a great Monday show for you as we get to, recap the Nikolaj Ehlers media availability with the Carolina Hurricanes writers to see, get his thoughts on a lot of the questions they threw out to him, and then also talk about what Elliotte, Friedman, and Kyle Bukauskas said on their last episode, 32 Thoughts for the 24-25 season, and give some background to how the Hurricanes got Ehlers and also how they got Miller. But before we jump into all of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, like I said, Nikolaj Ehlers did meet with the media over the 4th of July weekend, and the fact that it was over a Zoom call since he was over there in his home in Denmark, and there were some questions about why he came to the Carolina Hurricanes, what he's excited for, and what he can bring to the fit inside the system. So starting off, one of the first questions was, what made him want to become a Carolina Hurricane? And Ehlers said a lot of things. I'm very excited about the prospect. I'm very excited about the team in Carolina. They've been a tough team to play against in the past, and I like all the young players that are there. The interest that Carolina has shown was something that obviously helped a lot with the decision-making and made me very excited. And yeah, when you think about how much the Hurricanes went after Nikolaj Ehlers, there's been rumors that they were in on him over the last trade deadline, the deadline through the 23-24 season, and for the fact that they were one of the teams that were already talking to his camp come July 1st. And it was very apparent that the Hurricanes really wanted him, and I think that's what kind of helped with Ehlers coming here, because Elliotte Friedman did say when they were talking about him was the fact that Ehlers left a lot of money on the table to come to Carolina. Of course, we'll talk more of what Elliotte Friedman said, but one of the main things was the fact that Ehlers left money on the table to come to Carolina, and the fact that the interest from Carolina was so strong early on, it made the decision easier for him to come here, and that's why he said just the interest alone. And of course, you're talking about the fact that they just locked up Logan Stakehoven long term. That's a great move there. The fact that when they got that sign and trade for Keandre Miller, which we'll talk about more in segment 3. Of course, Jackson Blake, Seth Jarvis, all those guys, even with the prospects of Bradley Nadeau and all of them there, it made sense of, just looking at the core that they have. It's very, very exciting. If you're Nikolaj Ehlers coming to the Carolina Hurricanes for the next 6 years, $8.5 million. And speaking of the Canes, another one was about how he feels about the fit within the Hurricane system. Ehlers says, I think my speed, the stress game that Carolina plays in the sense of when they don't have the puck, for example, trying to get the puck back as quick as possible. I think with my speed, I'm able to do that. I think with my speed, I can create a lot of room for the other guys as well, and I believe that I will fit in very nicely, and that's obviously something you look at as well when you try to make a decision. I talked to Rod Brind'Amour, and we had kind of the same vision about how things are going to go. And again, the talks that I've had with the people in the Kings organization is something that really excited me. And yeah, that's something that really, sticks out for the fact that you look at, his nickname is Fly. And if you look at, the article that I put out last week, talking about the Nikolaj Ehlers within the Hurricane system, his speed bursts and percentiles, according to NHL Edge, were in the 85 to 95% range. He's got a lot of good speed, and if you looked at the 10-minute highlight video that the NHL put out over the weekend, showing Nikolaj Ehlers what he can do on YouTube, he can throw a lot of speed out there. He makes a lot of shots that no one think that he can get off. Like he's had one where it's very close quarters on a very bad angle, somehow finds the space there. He's gone through a 1v4 against 4 defensemen, still found a way to score, and just his agility to be very shifty and, start, stop, and just be able to get into areas that, other guys might take a little bit longer to get into. He finds that open space, and I think that's what's very going to help. And the fact that we all know with the Hurricane system, it's a lot of strong forechecking, a lot of pressure, and that's why you see a lot of teams get smothered in a lot of games too, and that's why you see, for the fact that the Hurricanes hold opponents down to having 25 or fewer shots a game. So I think with adding another speedster like Ehlers, who's not afraid to play a two-way game like he does, that's going to be a very big boost for there. And when asked about what he thinks that Carolina can bring out of him, he said, that's one of the things I'm trying to figure out. I think every player always has a little more, and I'm hoping that maybe a different culture, a different playing style will make me a better player. I think I definitely could have done that in Winnipeg as well in the same way, but this was more the overall feeling of, okay, I need to go out and see what's out there and challenge myself. I think there's still a lot of ways I can improve as a player and as a person. I'm excited to see how that works out. And that's something that is very interesting. When you look at a guy like Nikolaj Ehlers, who's been in the league for 10 years, all with the Winnipeg Jets, and he's 29. So he just signed a 6-year contract that puts him to about 35. But I think that gives, the perspective that he still wants to get better. Yeah, he could have done it in Winnipeg, but when you look at the Carolina Hurricanes and what they're doing, of course, with Rod Brind'Amour as the head coach and all that, and what they've done over the last few seasons under his tenure, I think it's just, it's betting on himself to become a better player. Maybe it's in a different system. So it's exciting to see when you look at a guy like Ehlers who's been there and done that, but still thinks he can get better, and that maybe a different system, and especially with the Hurricanes, could work out like that. And then, there was the, conversations about, coming to Carolina from, other former Canes, and then, what his overall perception of the Hurricanes was. So someone did ask him about, talking to Nino Niederreiter, who was a former Hurricane, talking about his thoughts on Carolina. Ehlers said, let me put it this way. I've talked to a lot of people. Obviously, the decision came a bit later than people thought. And the only reason for that was to set myself up in the best way possible to make the right decision. And I needed that time. I wasn't trying to drag it out and make it people wait. It was just what I needed to be comfortable in the decision-making. So yes, I talked to a lot of people and obviously tried to take in all the information and all the different impressions. It was a stressful, busy, but exciting time. A lot of time on my phone, let's put it that way. And yeah, it makes sense when you talk about guys like, talking to Nino Niederreiter, who was very loved in Carolina, and just the overall aspect of, you're making a very big decision because you've been with one organization for 10 years. You're going to a different market. You're going to a different system. You're going to a whole different coaching staff. And you're trying to do right by your family because you're talking 6 seasons. You're talking probably the last part of your career, and you're going to put yourself in a good spot. So it makes sense why you go talk to Nino Niederreiter. And, at least instead of going Tuesday, he signed on Thursday. Nothing wrong with that. And he said he didn't want to drag it out. So got to give Ehlers a lot of props for not thinking of just pure money, but what fit and stuff like that. And talking about fit, he said, like I said in my first answer, when it talks about thoughts on Carolina, they've always been hard to play against. You go to Carolina, you know exactly what they're going to doing to ready to play, and they're going to come out hard, and they're going to keep stressing you out until they get back on the puck. So now to be on the other side of that will be pretty fun. Again, I know how it is on hockey teams. It's like a family with all the players. Like I've said, I've only heard good things. So I'm excited to meet all the guys. Some of them already reached out, which means a lot to me, and it just makes it even more exciting to get the season going. And that basically goes back to how close this team is. Nikolaj Ehlers is going to fit in really well because especially with the leadership of Stahl, Aho, Martinuk, Slavin, he's going to fit in well. A lot of guys are going to love him, bring him in and be one of the guys. And then, speaking of one of those players, Frederik Andersen, and he said, I love that guy. We are very familiar. I'm excited to play with him. He's been a great goalie throughout his NHL career. We've obviously talked. He called me as soon as he heard the news. We've got the Olympics coming up in February as well, so it'll be a very special year, I think. To have him there as well to help me get integrated as quickly as possible and show me around the city and so on will help me a lot. I'm excited. It's going to be fun to play with another Danish guy. And that, I love that quote, when the fact that he immediately said, I love that guy when talking about Freddie Andersen. And the fact that now you've got 2 Danes on this team, and it's going to be very exciting to see because we got a lot of Russians, got a lot of Finns, and now we're going to have a couple Danes on this team. And the fact that that's going to help him a lot too, because now he's a fellow countryman who might know some other spots, maybe some other guys don't. I think that's going to be a big integral part of that. And that's what makes the Hurricanes so great is while as a whole team, yeah, they are a tight-knit group. But then you throw in a fellow countryman like that, and the fact that Ehlers and Freddie helped Denmark get into the 2026 Olympics, and now they're going to be together for the next 6 seasons, especially in the year where they're going to the Olympics. I think that's really great too. And the fact that, yeah, you got the whole big group, closest they are together, but then you also have that fellow countryman connection as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see what's going to come of possibly of content and just hearing stories about Nikolaj Ehlers and Frederik Andersen. It's very exciting, but overall, a lot of great things to hear about that. If you want to go check out more of that, it's on canespr.com. If you want to watch the full Zoom video, it's like 21 minutes. A lot of great stuff there, but it's very exciting. The fact that you got Nikolaj Ehlers excited to come to Carolina. He wanted to be here, took less money to come here, and he's going to be with some guys that are going to be making him feel really comfortable and part of the team. Now, that being said, like I said, Elliotte Friedman and Kyle Bukauskas from 32 Thoughts gave some insight into what the Hurricanes did over the first week. So stick around and we'll talk about it here in a second on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get on the game while your friends are getting sunburn on the beach. It's easy to use, it's got fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. The fact, too, is you can be placing same-game parlays, or you can just be watching a bet right in the 9th inning. FanDuel makes it feel like that you are part of the action from start to finish. So if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So like I said, Elliotte Friedman and Kyle Bukauskas of 32 Thoughts had, they talk about all 32 teams, a very long podcast. Luckily, the Hurricanes were first, if you're able to listen to that. But overall, they gave us some insights on what's going on with the whole, Ehlers and Miller acquisitions. And for the Hurricanes, it was pretty simple right from the jump when it came to Ehlers. Elliotte Friedman did mention that Ehlers was kind of looking for a more easier traveling considered. And when you look at the Western Conference, teams are a little bit more spaced out than when you look at the Eastern Conference as well and stuff like that. It kind of made sense why he was looking more of the Eastern Conference more than just, Winnipeg and all the other teams out west. Because, yeah, that's tough travel, especially if you're the Winnipeg Jets, because you're out there in Manitoba. It's still a couple hours flight going over to Alberta, going to Vancouver, even the west coast of the states, then talking Texas, Colorado, even Chicago and St. Louis. Like, there's a lot of travel for the West Coast. And then if you're going from East Coast to West Coast, that's still a lot of travel as well, too. And of course, you're still going to get that from the East Coast to the West Coast, but thankfully, if you're, in the conference that the Hurricanes are in, your travels are pretty quick for the most part. I know they said that the Hurricanes are remote. They're not. Raleigh-Durham is it's an international airport. It's not that serious. Like, you can easily get some decent flights out of there. Plus, the team flies private. They're going to be fine on that aspect. But yeah, it's a lot quicker flights. You're going from Carolina to like Columbus or the New York metro area or Florida, even, eastern part of Canada to Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal. Not that big of a deal. Traveling is going to be really easy. I can understand why Ehlers maybe was kind of looking towards the Eastern Conference just because the travel schedule isn't as insane as trying flying out of Winnipeg or just the Western Conference as an entire whole. And they also mentioned the fact too, it's a quieter market. And Ehlers even said it's not quiet for the fans. And he's like, and he even said, like, I had no issue with media in Winnipeg. He likes the media. So it's not more of Ehlers looking for a quieter environment. It's just, wanted to do something different. He felt like the Eastern Conference would, give him a different challenge than we've seen in the Western Conference. Nothing against that. And, just the traveling and everything else, plus the fit. So it made sense why Ehlers came to the Hurricanes. Like I said, too, he took less money when you're looking at a guy who was on 11 different teams were looking at him. Utah was making a run for him. Washington was another team. They even talked about Detroit. It seemed like Ehlers never met with Detroit, even though Detroit thought about it. Tampa was in the mix. Boston, there was at least almost a half dozen teams looking at Ehlers. He chose Carolina because of the fit, just because of the system that they run and stuff like that. And like I said, he even took less money to come here because there was talks of 9, possibly 9.5, but a lot of indications were looking at the $8.5 million range. Other teams were coming in with a lot more desperate moves, but Ehlers thought it was probably best to come to Carolina, and that's just kind of how it worked out. So all in all, it wasn't really crazy when it came to Ehlers, but it's just interesting when you get the insight from, Friedman and Kyle talking about, how many teams were involved, what's the possibility of, what could, down to travel, how much money was left off the table and stuff like that too. So, and now the whole narrative of, oh, no one wants to come to Carolina if they're big names. Well, not so much the case when you got Nikolaj Ehlers who's like, I wanted to come here because I loved the fit, like the system, like what core they have down here, and he loves the fan base too. He's very excited to play in front of the Caniacs and be on that side of it rather than being, smothered, not by just the guys alone, but just by the noise that is Lenovo Center. So the fact that he wanted to come here, excited to be around in that locker room with the leadership group, the young guys, and even the fact that he's got Freddie there too is going to be a big help in the course with the coaching staff of, Rod and Gleason and all those guys. That's going to be very big, and just the area too, because I think the one thing that's so great about Raleigh, which I think if you've never been there, definitely you should go. And I think it gets misconstrued a lot, or just people think, oh, it's Raleigh, who cares? It's kind of a whatever city. It's a really great hidden gem if you look at it. It's a medium-sized city, but with a small town feel of a lot of trees, a lot of stuff to do. And the fact too is if you look at the fan base, they'll say hi to you, but they're going to let you just be yourself. And I think that's what's a really good thing about raising a family in Carolina. That's why you see Jacob Slavin and his family, they live there year round. They don't have a second house. They don't go back to, wherever they're at. They love the area so much that they're permanent residents there. The Chatfield, Jalen Chatfield and his, family, same thing. They're thinking about, like that. Shane Willis has been there for over 20 years. Rod Brind'Amour has been in Raleigh for 20 years too. That's just the thing with the Hurricanes and just Raleigh in general. Yeah, it's still growing. Cary's a lot bigger. Even when I was a kid living in the area back in the late 90s, early 2000s, Raleigh, Cary Apex wasn't as big as it was then. But you look at it now, that's the good thing about Raleigh. And I think that's the one thing that people kind of miss out on is the fact that, like I said, it's a medium-sized city, but it feels like a small town almost because, like I said, people will say hi to you. They'll ask how you're doing and stuff like that, but they're not going to bombard you or give you a hard time about stuff. They're just going to let you kind of live your life, and I think that's one of the great things about the area, and that's why Ehlers decided to come here because he just knows, hearing about the area from former Hurricanes, like I said, Niederreiter, and then talking to the other guys, and then being asked to, he's already going to get shown around by Freddie and everyone else, and just what the culture on the front office, the culture overall with the team, the front office, the coaches, the players. It's a great spot to be in if you're the Carolina Hurricanes. The fact that once people can see it and understand it, they want to be there. That's why Jacob Slavin took, he signed his extension to be there for life and also took a big pay cut to help the team out because he knows that they need to build a team around him. That's why Stankoven got the extension done so fast because he loves the area. He loves the team. Same with Aho and Jarvis and all those guys. And that's why you have a lot of the alumni, Cam Ward, Justin Williams, Jesse Buller. So a lot of guys live in the area, Eric Cole and all of them. That's why I think a lot of people love Raleigh. So it makes sense. We got alumni there, current coaching staff, current players living there full time. So now you add to Nikolaj Ehlers, who's going to be joining a team, joining a city. He even said it's about playing for the city, and that's what he loves. He loved Winnipeg, and that's why he's not worried about media, even though it's a quieter town, quieter market, whatever that means. But he's like, media attention doesn't bother me, and I think that's what he loves with the fact that I play for the city. I don't play for because of what the media is saying. I'm playing for what the city is, and the fact that what he's heard about Raleigh is so great. That's why people need to, if you've never been there, go. Because Raleigh is amazing. The suburbs are amazing as well. It's a great area to be in. A lot of good shopping, a lot of good food, a lot of hidden gems down there. So definitely exciting to see what Ehlers can do. Now, they also talking about Keandre Miller and the fact that there was a pivot move, which saw the Hurricanes go to Keandre Miller. And that move was very, very interesting when you heard it from Elliotte Friedman. So stick around and we'll talk about what the initial targeted player was and why the Hurricanes had to pivot to Keandre Miller to get that deal done. So stick around. We'll talk about it here in a second on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. Now, with the Keandre Miller deal, we all know it's a sign and trade. Scott Morrow, conditional first, whichever best one of the two is. And of course, the Dallas pick is a top 10 protected and also gave up a second rounder. The initial move was a pivot, actually, to get Miller. From what Friedman is saying, and this is very interesting, we don't know how true it is, but this might have played into it. Friedman did say Carolina has a lot of cap room. Carolina has a lot of draft assets and draft capital. And I think that the Oilers were worried that the Hurricanes were going to offer sheet Evan Bouchard. He said Bouchard, but we were talking about Evan Bouchard. So they signed him to that extension. Didn't even let him get to July 1st. Now with Bouchard, it was supposed to be, a lot of people were thinking $9.5 million. Turns out, goes to a 4-year, $10.5 million. The thing is, the offer sheets around the range that he signed for, it was between $9 million, it was like $9.6 million to $11.7 and some change. That range fits right where Bouchard signed his extension with the Oilers. The compensation draft picks, of course, it has to be all of your picks for the following year. So you're talking 2026 picks. 2 firsts, a second, and a third. Now, could the Hurricanes have gotten there? Yes. Now, when you're talking first, obviously you're talking the 2026 first and the first, down the road, because not every team has multiples of their same first pick. So, like, see, if you go to 11-7, it has to be 4 of your first for the next consecutive years. So the Hurricanes went to give up their 2026 first and their 2027 first, along with their 2026 third. But the problem is they don't own their 2026 third. That pick is actually owned by the Utah Mammoth, or then Arizona Coyotes. That was in the 22-23 trade deadline for Shane Gostisbehere. So at the time, Arizona got the Carolinas 26. That being said, the Oilers were afraid and even got to the point where the Hurricanes actually did reach out back to Utah to see if they can get their third round pick back for next year, which means it would have opened up the offer sheet, which fits into that range of what Evan Bouchard signed for, because it's like 9.5, 9.6 to 11.7 and some dollar amount on the back end. That means the Hurricanes could have gone to 10.5 or gone up enough to where they would have put Edmonton to a tough spot of, are you going to sign this guy to this offer sheet, or are you going to let him walk and you're going to take our 4 draft picks if they got their third back? So the Hurricanes really could have gone there to where they could have put the Oilers in a very bad spot of, do you sign it or do you let him walk and take our picks? Like I said, that would have been a 2026 first, a 27 first, a 26 second, and a 26 third if they got their third back from Utah. That's why Edmonton signed Bouchard to that 10.5, because they were afraid Carolina was going to make that move. That says a lot when a team has to almost overpay their own guy, which I don't think it's an overpay for Bouchard, but definitely a lot more than what people thought he was going to get. The fact that they were so worried that the Hurricanes were going to pull that off, that's why they signed him before July 1st, because they didn't want the Hurricanes to get there if they talked to Utah. So that's why Bouchard got his extension, why it was done so quick, because Carolina was potentially going to go make a move for him for an offer sheet. You love to see that Tulsky and those guys are not afraid to go for the offer sheet. All of that to say, that's where you see the pivot move over to Keandre Miller, because they like his size, speed, stick skills that he has, and the fact that he can grow within the Hurricane system, because it seemed like he wasn't going to get a lot of great development with the Rangers because it was the team dropped off last year. So the Hurricane and the Rangers didn't want to commit that term, that amount of AAV to Miller. The Hurricanes saw it as, we're going to take that risk. We are going to go and trade Morrow, a conditional first and a second, instead of going to get our third. We're going to use the picks that we were going to use and try to get like Morrow, who would kind of fit around that third round pick range, to go get Miller. Give them the extension on the AAV, give them that 8 by 7.5. They're going to take that. They're going to take that risk. That's why they want to go and went and got Miller, because they're going to take that risk because they know they couldn't get Bouchard. That's why they got Miller. And honestly, they thought it was good. That's why that kind of trade happened. So it goes to show that while the Hurricanes, they were looking at Bouchard, which would have been a great addition to the Hurricanes, but they go and pivot that move to go get K'Andre Miller. And it worked out to where AV isn't too bad. It's a guy who's got a very high ceiling, young, got some really great speed, really high percentiles in terms of that. Someone's not going to score a lot, but really fits the Canes system well of having the speed that's necessary. Is, like I said, 110 blocks, 107 hits. Someone who's not afraid to put the body on the line and throw hits as well. And if you're talking like Jacob Slavin and Tim Gleason as guys to help train you, take you under your wing to get better, possibly you're going to pair him with Jalen Chatfield, who's thrived in this Hurricane system. I think K'Andre Miller is going to fit really well with the Hurricanes. And I think it's very interesting how the fact that you look at the pivot move from Bouchard to Miller. Hurricanes did a good job of that with the fact that Miller's young. AAV is going to be fine. The cap's still going up. It's going to go to 104 or more next year. So that 7.5 is not going to look bad at all. And the fact that he can get better, because a lot of people think that he hasn't even hit his ceiling yet. And they think he can do it in Carolina because Rod Brind'Amour saying he reminds him of Brady Shea. And a lot of people in New York thought Shea wasn't really that great, and he thrived in Carolina. So we could see another asset or another pathway of, hey, might not work here, go to Carolina. They might develop you. You might hit that next step into your career. And that's possibly what they're thinking with K'Andre Miller. So it's very interesting when you look at how the Hurricanes scared the Oilers enough into extending Bouchard for a bigger AAV and then turn around and pivoted to a conditional first, a second, and more to go get K'Andre Miller. And now you move on from Orlov and Burns, with Burns going to Colorado, Orlov going over to San Jose. Now you got younger with Alexander Nikish, who's in the last year for ZLC, and now you go younger also in K'Andre Miller, with both those guys having better speed, better offensive upside, and guys who can learn and thrive under the system well. I think the Hurricanes did a good job of looking at their defense included Orlov and Burns last year. Now you're pivoting to younger guys with some better upsides. Nothing against the guys you left, but you just got younger and just got a lot faster with those two additions on your blue. And so there's a lot of good things to be happy about if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, and especially for the fan base as well. The fact that the Hurricanes forced another team into an extension, and now you're setting yourself up with good possible blue line guys for the foreseeable future. So a lot of stuff to be excited about. And it's good to hear for the fact that they were the first team on 32 Thoughts to be talked about, and the fact that you hear from Friedman and Kyle that the Hurricanes did pretty dang well in the first week of free agency. And there's a lot more to go from there, but only time will tell what will happen next. I know Friedman did say he thinks that second C is still a very big option for the Carolina Hurricanes to address. So only time will tell. We have a long way to go before we hit the start of the regular season, of course, training camp in September, but things are totally going to be different. Might be different by then, because especially with the Hurricanes having $10.6 million left in cap. Well, guys, that will be a Monday edition of Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first listen. Your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where there is no offseason. We'll be bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky, the Zachary Martin, where you can click on my link trees on my bios to find all of my written content at thehockeyriders.com. A lot of stuff on free agency over the last few days, so go check that out. If you want to listen to my other podcasts, well, it's the Search Cast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, we're on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure to follow, subscribe, hit the bell, or leave a 5-star review, because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, well, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you don't miss a show. Hit the thumbs up to let me know if you like the show as well. Share with other Caniacs to become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Monday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.